Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling serverless architectures and, how to build web applications on Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, and we've got two Apress eBooks to guide us. One on distributed serverless architectures.
Right, vertile to serverless architecturen of Amazon Web Services.
Exactly. And the other on serverless Webanwendungen amid Amazon Web Services Amplify. So, serverless web apps with Amplify.
And our goal here, really, is to just pull out the most crucial bits, the key insights, so you can get a solid handle on these concepts, whether you're, totally new to this or just want a clearer picture.
Exactly. We're not just skimming the surface. We're going to try and dig into what actually makes these things work, why they're important now.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with that first one. Fortilt, Serverless Architecturen, the Distributed Serverless Architectures book.
Right.
It seems like it's aimed at IT folks who maybe haven't done much hands-on serverless work yet. It even starts right at the beginning, explaining what serverless is.
Yeah, and distributed systems too.
Yeah.
And that's important, Even if it seems basic to some, getting that shared foundation.
Yeah, a common language.
Exactly. Though the book's definitions are, let's say, concise, maybe a bit uneven sometimes. But what I found interesting is how quickly it jumps into architectural patterns.
Oh, okay.
It's not saying serverless is just one thing. It highlights loads of existing patterns and, crucially, that developers can and do create their own.
Right, that flexibility. That seems key.
It really is. You're not locked into one way of doing things.
Yeah, you can tailor it more. And it's not just theory, right? The book uses practical examples.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Things people actually deal with, like processing streaming data, handling emails, analytics.
Database recovery, too, I saw.
Yep, database recovery after failures. Really common scenarios. It makes the patterns feel, real.
And for the streaming and email examples, it talks about event-driven architecture. How does that fit in?
Well, event-driven is pretty central there. Think of it like one thing happens, say, data arrives in a stream, or an email gets sent.
Right.
And that triggers other actions like a chain reaction. It's super efficient, very scalable, because different bits can work on their own.
Right.
And the book really digs into AWS Kinesis streams for that. That's the service for managing those, real-time data flows.
Okay, Kinesis. Now, data storage, that can feel a bit different in serverless compared to, say, traditional databases. How does the book handle that?
It actually breaks it down quite nicely. It categorizes the AWS services involved around the data's journey.
Journey, how so?
Like data input, how data gets in, then storage, where it lives, then consumption, how you use it, and finally, visualization.
Ah, okay. Input, storage, consumption, visualization.
Yeah. So you can see how different services fit together. Maybe you collect user clicks with one service, store them in DynamoDB, query them for reports, and then use something else to make graphs. It clarifies the flow.
That makes sense. Now, something that might seem a bit odd. Containers in a serverless book. Aren't they kinda different beasts?
Hey, yeah, it sounds a bit contradictory, doesn't it? But the book addresses it.
Okay.
It's important. See, while serverless aims to hide servers, containers can still play a role. Think Lambda container images or AWS Fargate.
Like Fargate.
You package your code in a container, sure, but AWS handles the running and scaling for you. You're still offloading the operational work.
So it's serverless from the developer's management perspective, even with containers involved.
Exactly. Useful if you're maybe moving existing container stuff over.
Got it. And looking forward, the book sounds pretty bullish on serverless, doesn't it? Suggesting maybe everything goes serverless eventually. Multi-cloud serverless.
It's definitely optimistic, a big vision for sure. But, it taps into that trend of abstracting away infrastructure.
Makes sense.
As the tech matures, maybe running things across different clouds seamlessly becomes more real. Less vendor lock-in, more flexibility.
And what about this idea that serverless is the genius way to build innovative apps? That's quite a claim.
It is strong wording,
Yeah.
but I think the logic is if you free developers from managing servers, they have more brain power, more time for the actual application logic, the cool new features. It's about faster experiments, faster innovation.
Right. Less time on plumbing, more on building the actual house.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, let's pivot now. The second book, Serverless Webanwendungen mit Amazon Web Services Amplify. This one seems to have a wider target audience.
Yeah, definitely broader. Beginners right through to pros. And the content range reflects that.
How so?
Well, you'll find really basic stuff like it literally explains what a pin is for. right alongside some pretty advanced topics. It's a bit mixed together, which is why the authors themselves suggest maybe reading it in multiple passes.
Right, like one pass for basics,
Yeah.
another for deeper dives.
Exactly. Pick out what you need based on your level.
And the core focus is AWS Amplify itself, which is what exactly?
Yeah.
A toolkit.
Yeah, think of it as a collection of tools and services. It helps you build full-stack apps, front-end, back-end, the works, and even handles web hosting.
Okay. And the book uses a specific approach for its examples.
It does. They call it a model back-end service approach. Basically, showing how to build front ends, connect them to a serverless back-end via REST APIs,
Right.
and really focusing on those core CR-dude operations. Create, read, update, delete. The bread and butter of most apps.
And it sounds like the Amplify CLI, the command line interface, is pretty central to how the book shows you things.
Oh, absolutely central. Lots of examples kick off with Amplify commands. Amplify add OP, Amplify push, things like that. It's very hands-on.
Learn by doing.
Precisely.
But it's not just AWS, is it? I saw mentions of Google Cloud Platform, even GraphQL.
Yeah, which is good. It acknowledges that, the real world isn't always just one cloud provider.
True.
And GraphQL is a popular alternative to REST. So showing those provides context, shows the principles aren't only for AWS REST APIs.
Good point. And it starts with setting up Amplify properly, like a good tutorial.
Seems so. A thorough setup guide at the beginning. And you mentioned the epigraphs. Little quotes at the start of chapters.
Yeah, just a small detail, but kind of nice.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 apparently has one. Adds a bit of flavor.
Little things like that can help, yeah. And then on core stuff like authentication, authorization, making sure the right people access the right things.
Super important.
Crucial. The book apparently goes deep, talks JSON web tokens, structure, common problems, and how to solve them. That's foundational for web apps.
And it uses notes to highlight key points and line-by-line code explanations. That sounds really helpful for learning.
Definitely. Breaking down code line by line can demystify things fast, and those little note boxes often contain nuggets of really important info or definitions. It caters to different learning styles.
Okay, now you mentioned a big theoretical chunk, nearly 300 pages. How does that fit in with the practical Amplify stuff?
Well, theory provides the why behind the how. Understanding the principles makes the practical steps make more sense.
The book even discusses how tech language evolves, using protocol as an example. HTTP is a protocol, but that's different from the general meaning of protocol.
Right. Context matters.
Exactly. So they define terms like API carefully so everyone's on the same page. It's about understanding the language we use to build things.
And Lambda layers come up too. It's about code reuse, right?
Yeah, Lambda layers are a standard way to share code like utility functions or libraries across multiple Lambda functions.
Okay.
Keep your functions tidy, easy to manage. You update the layer, not like 10 different functions. It's just good practice.
Makes sense. And offline apps. That's interesting. The book covers building apps that work when there's no internet.
Yeah, both fully offline and ones that need to keep ticking over during connection drops. That's actually really valuable.
Definitely. We tend to assume constant connectivity.
Right. But it's not always the case. Building for resilience is key for user experience.
And being an Amplify book, naturally it digs into data storage with Amplify commands. It likely shows how Amplify simplifies setting up things like app sync, maybe DynamoDB or S3, using those CLI commands, takes away some of the direct configuration hassle.
Streamlining again. Same for analytics, it seems. Using Pinpoint and Kinesis with Amplify commands to help.
Exactly. Integrating analytics can seem daunting, but Amplify aims to make it easier to plug in services like Pinpoint for user tracking or Kinesis for data streams. It lowers that barrier.
And insights into using S3, since S3 is, well, everywhere.
Yeah, S3 is fundamental. So the book probably covers how Amplify apps interact with it, uploading files, managing access, maybe triggering other things based on S3 events, practical S3 usage.
Okay, and deployment. CI/CD, GitHub integration, using Git and Amplify commands together.
Absolutely crucial for modern workflows. Version control with Git, managing different environments like dev, staging, prod, using Amplify commands.
Like Amplify MV-add or list.
Probably things like that, yeah. It's all about automating the process, making releases faster and sniffer.
And finally, it looks ahead a bit. AI with Amazon Lex for chatbots. And Amplify Studio.
Yeah, touching on Lex shows how you could add conversational AI. And Amplify Studio. That's the visual development side.
Right, low code, no code element.
It can speed up UI building and connecting it to the back end, complementing the CLI approach.
So wrapping this up, looking back at both books, it really feels like a progression.
Definitely.
From the core ideas of serverless architecture in the first book
The foundations.
to the practicalities of building a full-stack web app with a specific toolkit, Amplify, in the second.
Yeah, it's a logical path, and hopefully our chat today has given you a shortcut, a distilled view of those core ideas and tools.
Solid base camp for exploring further, maybe.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about all this serverless principles, Amplify, event-driven stuff, containers even, what specific part actually makes you the most curious? What deeper dive might tell you something interesting about where application building is headed?
Yeah. Good question to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.